SpongeBob looked silly on purpose, but the background was hiding genius. Keep watching because Bikini Bottom is packed with tiny jokes, strange details, and secrets most people missed while laughing at a sponge flipping burgers. 1. SpongeBob was not created by some random cartoon executive who thought, kids need a screaming kitchen sponge. He came from Stephen Hillenburg, a real marine biology student and former teacher who later studied animation, which explains why Bikini Bottom feels ridiculous but oddly specific. The show is full of sea creatures, choral logic, underwater workplaces, and tiny ocean details that don't feel like decoration. They feel like someone actually knew the material and then decided to throw a pineapple, a cash register, and a depressed octopus into it. Hillenburg also worked on Rocko's Modern Life, which helps explain SpongeBob's weird grown-up rhythm. It looks childish, but the jokes often hit like office comedy wearing swim trunks. That is the secret many viewers never noticed. SpongeBob is not just nonsense. It is marine science, workplace misery, and Saturday morning chaos blended into one very loud sponge. 2. The first SpongeBob episode, Help Wanted, quietly told you everything about the show before anyone realized it would become a cultural monster. It aired on Nickelodeon in 1999, and the plot was beautifully simple. SpongeBob wants a job at the Krusty Krab. That's it. No superhero origin, no magical prophecy, no chosen one nonsense. Just a square little optimist trying to get hired by a greedy crab who sells burgers underwater, which is already insane if you think about it for more than 3 seconds. But the genius is in the setup. SpongeBob's dream job is not glamorous. He wants to stand over a grill and make food for customers who barely respect him. Somehow, that became inspiring. The episode made his innocence feel powerful, not stupid. He wasn't cool, rich, or tough. He was excited to work. That may be the most unrealistic fantasy Nickelodeon ever aired. 3. One secret hiding in plain sight is that SpongeBob became huge because adults could enjoy the pain behind the jokes. Nickelodeon described the series as a global pop culture phenomenon, translated into more than 55 languages and seen in over 208 countries, which is wild for a show about a sponge who lives in fruit and annoys his neighbor professionally. But the reason it traveled so well is simple. Bikini Bottom is basically real life in disguise. Mr. Krabs is every cheap boss. Squidward is every exhausted employee who once had dreams. Patrick is every friend who gives terrible advice with total confidence. And SpongeBob is the one person still happy to be there, which somehow makes him both the hero and the scariest character in the room. Kids saw colors and funny voices. Adults saw rent, bad jobs, annoying neighbors, and customer service trauma. That's why the show lasted. It was silly enough for children and painfully accurate for everyone else. 4. One of the funniest secrets hiding in plain sight is the address on SpongeBob's driver's license. If you pause the episode where his license is shown, you'll spot that he lives at 124 Conch Street, the same address everyone in Bikini Bottom seems to know. It sounds like an ordinary cartoon detail, but it became one of the most recognizable fictional addresses in television history. Fans have recreated it in games, artwork, and even real-life mailboxes. The joke goes even deeper because SpongeBob lives inside a pineapple that somehow survives underwater without rotting, while every other house on the street follows a completely different design. Squidward lives inside a giant Easter Island-style moai head. Patrick calls a simple rock home, and nobody ever questions why this neighborhood exists. That's classic SpongeBob logic. The show never wastes time explaining impossible things because the characters accept them as perfectly normal. Instead, the writers focus on making the world feel familiar despite its absurdity. It is one of the reasons Bikini Bottom feels like a real hometown rather than just another cartoon setting. Every building has personality, every street has history, and even a tiny detail like SpongeBob's address helps make the world feel strangely believable. 5. If you've ever wondered why SpongeBob flips Krabby Patties with the passion of a Michelin star chef, there's a clever reason. Stephen Hillenburg once explained that SpongeBob genuinely loves his job. That may sound obvious, but it completely changed how the character was written. Most sitcom characters complain about work, dream about quitting, or secretly hate their boss. SpongeBob does the exact opposite. Every morning he runs to the Krusty Krab like he just won the lottery. That endless enthusiasm becomes even funnier because everyone around him reacts like exhausted adults trapped in the same workplace. Mr. Krabs only cares about money, Squidward desperately wants to go home, and the customers constantly create problems. SpongeBob somehow treats every burnt burger, impossible order, or angry customer as another exciting adventure. That contrast is the joke. His optimism never feels fake because he honestly believes making the perfect Krabby Patty matters. Ironically, that attitude makes the adults watching laugh even harder than the kids. Anyone who has worked a retail or restaurant job immediately understands the chaos. SpongeBob simply experiences that chaos with the excitement of someone opening presents on Christmas morning. 6. The Krabby Patty recipe is probably the biggest mystery in the entire series, and the writers intentionally refuse to answer it. Fans have spent decades debating whether it contains seafood, vegetables, or some completely unknown ingredient. Plankton builds giant robots, creates elaborate disguises, invents mind control devices, and even starts fake businesses just to steal the formula. Yet he never succeeds for long. That running joke became one of television's greatest unresolved mysteries. Interestingly, the creators have always avoided revealing the recipe because the mystery itself is far more entertaining than any actual answer could ever be. If viewers finally learned every ingredient, one of SpongeBob's oldest jokes would immediately disappear. Even in episodes where Plankton briefly gets the formula, something always goes wrong before he can use it. Sometimes Mr. Krabs tricks him, sometimes SpongeBob accidentally saves the day, and sometimes Plankton defeats himself through overconfidence. The secret recipe is really a storytelling tool rather than a food recipe. It keeps the rivalry between the Krusty Krab and the Chum Bucket alive while giving the writers endless opportunities to invent increasingly ridiculous schemes that somehow become even funnier every season. 7 Squidward may complain more than anyone else in Bikini Bottom, but here's the detail many viewers miss. He isn't actually a squid. According to the show's creators, Squidward is an octopus. His rounded head and 6 visible tentacles often confuse people, yet animators deliberately gave him only 6 limbs, because drawing 8 arms in every single scene would have made animation much slower and far more expensive. That practical production decision accidentally created one of the show's funniest misconceptions. Even his name stayed Squidward because it simply sounded funnier than Octoward ever could. His personality also makes much more sense once you notice the joke. While SpongeBob and Patrick live in constant excitement, Squidward dreams about peace, classical music, painting, and being left alone. Unfortunately for him, he lives between the loudest neighbors in television history. Adults often discover that they understand Squidward far more than they did as children. As kids, he seemed grumpy for no reason. Years later, after dealing with noisy neighbors, impossible customers, and stressful jobs, many fans realized Squidward wasn't trying to ruin everyone's fun. Most of the time, he simply wanted 5 quiet minutes to play his clarinet in peace. 8. The Flying Dutchman may seem like just another spooky character, but his design quietly references centuries of maritime folklore. The legend of the Flying Dutchman existed long before SpongeBob, describing a ghost ship doomed to sail forever without reaching port. The series transforms that eerie myth into something hilariously ridiculous. Instead of terrifying sailors every minute, Bikini Bottom's Flying Dutchman often behaves like an impatient landlord, an overdramatic magician, or a frustrated employee dealing with incompetent ghosts. His supernatural powers remain impressive, but his biggest weakness is usually his own personality. He can summon fire, fly through walls, and curse entire ships, yet he constantly loses arguments with SpongeBob, Patrick, or even his own crew. That's classic SpongeBob storytelling. Take something legendary, then surround it with complete nonsense until the audience laughs, instead of hiding behind the couch. The writers never mock the original folklore directly. Instead, they cleverly use it as a foundation for comedy. Many younger viewers never realized the Flying Dutchman came from a real maritime legend, making this one of those hidden educational details that quietly slipped into a cartoon without ever feeling like a history lesson. 9. One of the smartest visual jokes in SpongeBob has nothing to do with the characters at all. Watch carefully whenever there's a close-up of a newspaper, billboard, menu, or advertisement. Instead of meaningless scribbles, the artists often include tiny jokes hidden in the background. Some signs advertise ridiculous products, Others contain absurd business names, and many feature underwater puns that flash by too quickly to notice during a normal viewing. Freeze-frame fans have spent years collecting these hidden details because nearly every episode rewards careful attention. The background artists clearly had as much fun as the writers. Even ordinary grocery stores, museums, traffic signs, and restaurant menus are packed with visual comedy. This extra layer explains why SpongeBob stays entertaining after countless rewatches. Kids usually focus on the characters, while older viewers begin spotting dozens of hidden jokes that completely escaped them before. It's almost like two different shows exist at the same time. One plays at normal speed, while another appears only when you pause the screen. That incredible attention to detail helped Bikini Bottom feel alive, because every corner of the city contains something unexpected waiting to be discovered. Well, 10 SpongeBob has survived for more than 2 decades because the writers never treated it like a show that only children would watch. From the very beginning, episodes included references that older audiences could appreciate without confusing younger viewers. There are nods to classic monster movies, old television shows, famous works of art, workplace culture, and even subtle film techniques that many kids completely miss. None of those jokes interrupt the story because they are carefully layered beneath the main comedy. Children laugh at SpongeBob chasing jellyfish or accidentally annoying Squidward, while adults recognize satire about boring office jobs, greedy employers, difficult customers, and everyday life. That balance is remarkably difficult to achieve, yet SpongeBob has managed it for years. It explains why so many parents who watched the show with their children eventually became genuine fans themselves. The series never talks down to its audience, regardless of age. Instead, it trusts viewers to discover new jokes every time they return to Bikini Bottom. That's the biggest secret of all. SpongeBob never really changed. We did. As we grew older, we simply started noticing all the brilliant little details that had been hiding there since the very beginning. 11. One of the easiest SpongeBob secrets to miss appears every time the French narrator begins an episode with the famous line, "Ah, the sea." Most viewers remember the voice, but very few know why he's even there. The French narrator was inspired by the old documentaries of legendary ocean explorer Jacques Cousteau. Stephen Hillenburg admired marine documentaries, and instead of opening the show with a normal narrator, he chose someone who sounded like an old explorer introducing viewers to a mysterious underwater world. The joke works on 2 levels. Kids simply hear a funny accent before the story begins. Adults recognize that the show is parodying serious nature documentaries that treat the ocean like an unexplored wilderness. Then, seconds later, the camera zooms into a pineapple where a sponge is oversleeping for work. That contrast perfectly captures SpongeBob's humor. It begins like an educational documentary before immediately collapsing into complete chaos. The French narrator appears only briefly in most episodes, but his voice quietly reminds viewers that Bikini Bottom is supposed to exist beneath the real ocean, no matter how ridiculous life becomes once the story actually starts. 12. Have you ever noticed that almost every fish in Bikini Bottom wears clothes while actual sea animals usually do not? It sounds like a tiny artistic choice, but it secretly helps tell you which characters are meant to represent everyday citizens. Fish walk around wearing shirts, dresses, hats, business suits, police uniforms, or swimsuits even though they're already underwater. Meanwhile, jellyfish behave like wild animals, snails act like household pets, and worms are treated more like dangerous wildlife. Gary is actually a sea snail, but within the show's universe, he fills the role of a loyal house cat. He meows instead of making snail sounds, sleeps in a pet bed, and even chases toys around the house. Jellyfish replace bees in Bikini Bottom's ecosystem, buzzing through jellyfish fields while SpongeBob collects jelly the same way someone might collect honey. The writers built an entire underwater society with surprisingly consistent rules hidden beneath all the jokes. Children simply see colorful creatures, but the world building quietly follows its own strange internal logic. The more closely you watch, the more you realize Bikini Bottom isn't random at all. It operates like a fully functioning city where every animal has a specific role. 13 SpongeBob's laugh is one of the most recognizable sounds in television history, but it almost sounded completely different. Voice actor Tom Kenny didn't invent the laugh by accident. He carefully experimented with different voices before finding the energetic giggle that perfectly matched SpongeBob's personality. Kenny has explained that he wanted SpongeBob to sound endlessly optimistic without becoming annoying, which is a surprisingly difficult balance. The laugh itself became so iconic that people can recognize it after hearing only a second or two. Interestingly, Kenny also provides voices for dozens of other characters across animation, proving how much range one performer can have. Yet, whenever he slips into SpongeBob's cheerful voice, people instantly know who they're hearing. The performance is full of tiny details beyond the laugh. SpongeBob gasps dramatically, stretches certain words, and speaks with genuine excitement about even the smallest events. Those choices make the character feel alive instead of simply reading dialogue. That's why SpongeBob remains funny after so many years. The jokes matter, but Tom Kenny's performance gives the character an infectious energy that keeps every conversation entertaining, whether SpongeBob is chasing jellyfish or just making breakfast. 14. If you've ever wondered why Bubble Bass became such a memorable character despite appearing only occasionally, the answer comes down to one perfectly executed joke. In his first appearance, Bubble Bass loudly accuses SpongeBob of forgetting the pickles on his Krabby Patty. Mr. Krabs believes the customer, SpongeBob loses confidence, and everything falls apart. Then the truth is revealed. Bubble Bass secretly hid the pickles underneath his tongue the entire time just to embarrass SpongeBob. That simple gag became one of the show's most unforgettable moments because it perfectly captured the frustration of dealing with dishonest customers. Anyone who has worked in customer service immediately understands the situation. Sometimes the problem isn't the employee, it's the customer creating unnecessary drama. Years later, the series brought Bubble Bass back, turning him into a recurring character whose exaggerated personality only became funnier over time. Fans still reference the hidden pickle scene because it feels surprisingly realistic beneath the cartoon exaggeration. SpongeBob wasn't incompetent. He simply encountered someone determined to complain no matter what happened. It's a joke that gets even better once you've experienced real life and realized people like Bubble Bass actually exist. 15. Patrick Star looks like the least intelligent character in Bikini Bottom, but every now and then the writers quietly reveal that he understands far more than he lets on. Throughout the series, Patrick occasionally delivers surprisingly thoughtful observations before immediately returning to complete nonsense. Those brief flashes of intelligence became one of the show's funniest running jokes. Instead of making him consistently foolish, the writers allow Patrick to stumble into moments of accidental wisdom that completely catch everyone off guard. Sometimes he solves complicated problems through pure luck. Other times, he asks simple questions that expose flaws in everyone else's logic. Then, just as viewers begin thinking Patrick has finally become a genius, he says something unbelievably ridiculous and destroys the illusion. That unpredictable rhythm keeps his character fresh. Patrick isn't just the dumb friend, he's completely impossible to predict. Even the other characters never know whether he's about to reveal unexpected insight or forget how doors work. That's why Patrick became one of animation's greatest comic sidekicks. His unpredictability turns ordinary conversations into hilarious disasters because absolutely nobody, including the audience, knows what sentence is coming next. 16. Hidden detail that longtime fans love involves the title cards separating scenes. Instead of using plain text, SpongeBob introduces each time skip with colorful backgrounds, tropical music, and wonderfully dramatic phrases like "several hours later," "meanwhile," or the unforgettable "one eternity later." Those title cards became jokes all by themselves. Their exaggerated wording makes tiny delays sound like world-changing historical events. Waiting 5 minutes suddenly feels like surviving an entire lifetime. The backgrounds often resemble old Hawaiian postcards or vintage travel artwork, matching the series' tropical atmosphere while giving every transition its own personality. Many viewers never realize how much effort goes into something that appears for only a few seconds. Those cards help establish SpongeBob's playful storytelling style before the next scene even begins. Over time, phrases like "one eternity later" escaped the cartoon and became internet memes used by millions of people who may not even realize where they originated. It's another example of SpongeBob quietly influencing pop culture in unexpected ways. A simple transition card could have been completely forgettable, but the writers transformed it into one more joke that audiences still quote decades later. 17. The Chum Bucket has one of the funniest hidden design choices in the entire series. At first glance, it simply looks like another fast food restaurant competing with the Krusty Krab. Look more closely though, and you'll notice that almost nobody ever eats there. The building is usually empty except for Plankton and Karen, his computer wife. Even when customers occasionally enter, something almost always scares them away before they order. The restaurant itself becomes part of the joke. Plankton spends more time inventing elaborate schemes to steal the Krabby Patty formula than improving his own menu or customer service. It's a clever parody of businesses that obsess over defeating competitors instead of fixing their own problems. Karen repeatedly points out the obvious solution, but Plankton ignores her because stealing success always sounds easier than earning it. That dynamic gives the series endless comic possibilities while revealing something surprisingly true about human nature. Sometimes failure isn't caused by bad luck. It's caused by focusing all your energy on someone else's achievements instead of your own. SpongeBob wraps that lesson inside endless comedy, making viewers laugh before they even realize there's a real idea hiding underneath. 18 SpongeBob's Pineapple House may be impossible in real life, but its existence actually comes from an old maritime tradition. Pineapples have long symbolized hospitality, especially in coastal communities where sailors returning from long voyages would display pineapples to show they had safely arrived home. Stephen Hillenburg liked that symbolism and transformed it into SpongeBob's cheerful home. The result perfectly fits the character. SpongeBob is welcoming, friendly, and always happy to invite people inside, even if those people rarely appreciate the invitation. The house itself is filled with imaginative details that reinforce his personality. Bright furniture, colorful decorations, and an endless sense of optimism fill every room. Meanwhile, Squidward's stone house feels organized but lonely, while Patrick's rock barely qualifies as furniture at all. Without saying a word, each home tells viewers exactly who lives there. Production designers used architecture as another storytelling tool rather than simply creating random buildings. That's one reason Bikini Bottom feels so memorable. Every location reflects the personality of its owner, making the neighborhood instantly recognizable, even when no characters appear on screen. 19 Karen, Plankton's computer wife, quietly became one of the smartest characters in the entire series. She began as a relatively simple supporting character, but over the years, the writers expanded her personality into something much more entertaining. Karen isn't just a talking computer. She's Plankton's business partner, voice of reason, technical expert, and occasionally the only character capable of keeping his ridiculous plans from completely collapsing. Her sarcastic comments often deliver some of the show's funniest lines because she understands exactly how unrealistic Plankton's latest invention is before anyone else does. Unlike many cartoon-side characters, Karen has genuine opinions and isn't afraid to criticize her husband when necessary. Their relationship feels surprisingly believable, despite involving a tiny Plankton and a waterproof computer. They argue like an ordinary married couple, solve problems together, and occasionally support each other even after endless disagreements. That unusual relationship adds another layer of humor that younger viewers may overlook. Adults often recognize that Karen isn't simply a machine. She's the patient spouse, constantly trying to stop someone from making yet another spectacularly bad decision. 21 of the greatest SpongeBob secrets isn't hidden inside a single episode at all. It's the fact that nearly every generation discovers a completely different show. Children laugh at the silly expressions, loud voices, and outrageous adventures. Teenagers begin quoting Patrick and Squidward online through countless memes. Adults suddenly realize the series contains surprisingly accurate jokes about jobs, difficult bosses, annoying customers, friendship, disappointment, and finding happiness in ordinary routines. The episodes never changed. The audience simply grew older. That's incredibly rare for any television series, especially one originally created for children. Stephen Hillenburg believed animation could entertain everyone without talking down to younger viewers or excluding adults. That philosophy shaped SpongeBob from the very beginning, allowing the series to remain fresh through decades of reruns. Every rewatch reveals another background joke, clever reference, or emotional moment that previously slipped by unnoticed. In many ways, that's the biggest secret hiding in Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob never depended on flashy twists or complicated stories. It built an imaginative world so rich with tiny details that viewers keep finding new reasons to smile, even after watching the same episodes for years. 21. One of the most interesting details in SpongeBob is how often the show quietly references real underwater technology. The famous invisible boatmobiles may look like a random joke, but they parody the idea that underwater transportation should exist even if viewers can never actually see it. SpongeBob, Patrick, and the rest of Bikini Bottom drive them exactly like cars, obey traffic laws, stop at intersections, and even take driving lessons. The joke isn't simply that the boats are invisible, it's that everyone treats this completely impossible situation as perfectly ordinary. Mrs. Puff teaches driving with total professionalism, while dozens of invisible vehicles crash around the city every day. SpongeBob somehow destroys almost every boatmobile he touches, turning a simple driving test into a citywide disaster. The running gag works because it combines everyday frustrations with cartoon absurdity. Anyone who has ever struggled with driving lessons understands SpongeBob's panic, while the invisible vehicles make every accident even funnier. It's another example of the writers taking a familiar part of adult life and transforming it into something unforgettable without ever losing the show's cheerful, playful tone. 22. The Goo Lagoon is much more than Bikini Bottom's favorite beach. It quietly mirrors the role beaches play in real coastal communities, except everything is turned upside down because the characters already live underwater. Instead of swimming in water, the residents relax in a mysterious substance called goo. Nobody ever seriously explains what the goo actually is, and that's exactly the point. The writers intentionally leave it unexplained because trying to apply real-world science would ruin the joke. SpongeBob and Patrick spend entire days sunbathing, surfing, and building sandcastles despite already living beneath the ocean. Somehow, it all makes perfect sense while you're watching. The Goo Lagoon episodes also reveal another hidden strength of the series. The background artists created a complete vacation destination with lifeguard towers, snack stands, beach umbrellas, and crowded shorelines that make Bikini Bottom feel like a genuine seaside town. Even though every resident technically lives underwater, they still crave a relaxing day at the beach. It's wonderfully illogical, and that's why it works. SpongeBob constantly reminds viewers that comedy doesn't need perfect logic when the world itself is built around imagination. 23. If you pay close attention to the music in SpongeBob, you'll notice that it feels completely different from most animated shows. Instead of relying only on traditional cartoon music, the series frequently uses Hawaiian-inspired tunes, ukulele melodies, steel guitar, and relaxed island rhythms. That wasn't a random decision. Stephen Hillenburg wanted Bikini Bottom to feel warm, tropical, and welcoming despite being located deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Those musical choices instantly create a laid-back atmosphere before the characters even speak. Many short musical pieces used throughout the series actually come from vintage production music libraries that were popular decades before SpongeBob premiered. That gives the show a timeless feeling that's difficult to explain but immediately recognizable. The soundtrack quietly tells viewers they're entering a cheerful coastal world where strange things happen every day. Even dramatic scenes often include surprisingly relaxed music, creating a funny contrast between complete chaos and calm island melodies. Without that soundtrack, Bikini Bottom would feel like an entirely different place. The music is one of the hidden ingredients that help turn SpongeBob into an unforgettable television experience. 24 Mrs. Puff may seem like nothing more than SpongeBob's frustrated boating instructor, but her backstory contains one of the show's funniest hidden ideas. Every single driving lesson becomes a complete disaster, yet she continues showing up for work day after day. Over the years, viewers learn that she constantly fears SpongeBob entering her classroom because she knows another accident is almost guaranteed. Boats explode, buildings collapse, and traffic descends into complete chaos. Yet she somehow survives every lesson. Adults often find Mrs. Puff much funnier than children because she's essentially every overworked teacher trying to educate one impossible student without losing her sanity. Her patience stretches far beyond what seems humanly possible. Every time SpongeBob proudly announces he's ready for another driving test, Mrs. Puff immediately expects the worst. The funniest part is that SpongeBob genuinely tries his best. He isn't lazy or rebellious. He simply becomes overwhelmed by panic whenever he sits behind the wheel. That combination makes both characters surprisingly sympathetic. Mrs. Puff isn't cruel, and SpongeBob isn't reckless. They're simply trapped inside the longest, most hilarious driving lesson in television history. 25. The name Bikini Bottom sounds like a funny invention, but it actually has a real-world inspiration. Many fans have pointed out that it references Bikini Atoll, a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean. Bikini Atoll became famous during the 20th century because it was used for nuclear testing by the United States. The series never directly explores that history, and Stephen Hillenburg never turned it into a central plot point. Instead, the name simply adds another playful layer to the fictional setting. Over the years, countless fan theories have claimed SpongeBob's unusual sea creatures exist because of radiation from those nuclear tests. While the theory became incredibly popular online, the show's creators have never confirmed it as official canon. In reality, SpongeBob's bizarre underwater world was designed to be imaginative rather than scientifically explained. That's an important distinction many viewers miss. Not every mystery needs a hidden answer. Sometimes a pineapple is just a pineapple, and a talking sponge exists simply because the story becomes funnier that way. The fan theory remains entertaining, but the real magic comes from the writer's creativity rather than any secret scientific explanation. 26. One tiny detail that longtime viewers love is how often SpongeBob accidentally breaks the fourth wall without completely shattering the illusion. Characters occasionally acknowledge dramatic music, interact with the narrator, or react to title cards as though they know they're inside a television show. These moments happen so naturally that younger viewers often don't even notice them. Instead of stopping the story, the jokes become part of the comedy itself. SpongeBob might suddenly freeze because a narrator announces something unexpected, or Patrick might question why strange sound effects are happening around them. The writers use these moments sparingly, making each one feel surprising instead of repetitive. That's why they remain memorable years later. Many animated shows rely heavily on self-aware humor, but SpongeBob carefully balances those jokes with sincere storytelling. The characters never become cynical or sarcastic about living inside a cartoon. They simply accept impossible events as another normal day in Bikini Bottom. That playful attitude allows the series to experiment with storytelling while preserving the innocent charm that made audiences fall in love with SpongeBob in the first place. 27. Sandy Cheeks stands out immediately because she's the only major land animal living permanently beneath the ocean. Rather than ignoring that obvious problem, the writers turned it into one of the smartest running jokes in the series. Sandy survives inside a large glass dome filled with air, wears a diving suit whenever she leaves, and constantly reminds everyone that she comes from Texas. Her home combines advanced science with country charm, creating one of Bikini Bottom's most unique locations. Sandy is also one of the few characters who regularly invents complex machines and conducts scientific experiments. That reflects Stephen Hillenburg's own love of science while showing young viewers that intelligence can be exciting rather than boring. Despite being brilliant, Sandy also enjoys karate, rodeo tricks, and friendly competitions with SpongeBob. She never feels like the stereotypical genius character. Instead, she balances scientific curiosity with adventurous energy. Her friendship with SpongeBob works because they encourage each other's enthusiasm instead of competing. Sandy brings knowledge, SpongeBob brings optimism, and together they create some of the show's most imaginative episodes. It's a partnership built on curiosity rather than conflict. 28. The Krusty Krab's design hides another clever visual joke that many viewers overlook. The restaurant resembles a lobster trap, fitting perfectly with Mr. Krabs' identity as a crab obsessed with catching customers and making money. Nearly every part of the building reinforces his personality. The wooden walls resemble an old seaside restaurant, the nautical decorations celebrate ocean life, and the cash register always occupies the most important position behind the counter. Even Mr. Krabs' office sits above the dining area like a captain's cabin on an old ship, allowing him to watch both his employees and his profits. These details aren't explained through dialogue because they don't need to be. The production designers quietly use architecture to reveal character traits. Compare that with the Chum Bucket, whose cold metal appearance feels sterile, mechanical, and uninviting. Without saying a word, both restaurants communicate exactly why one succeeds while the other struggles. The Krusty Krab feels warm, familiar, and welcoming. The Chum Bucket looks like a laboratory where lunch might accidentally become a science experiment. Visual storytelling like this gives Bikini Bottom remarkable depth beneath its colorful surface. 29 SpongeBob's imagination often becomes so powerful that it literally changes the world around him, and no episode demonstrates this better than Idiot Box. The entire story revolves around SpongeBob and Patrick playing inside a cardboard box while Squidward desperately tries to discover what makes it so entertaining. From Squidward's perspective, they're simply sitting inside an empty box making strange noises. From SpongeBob and Patrick's perspective, they're racing through impossible adventures, flying across imaginary worlds, and experiencing incredible excitement. The episode quietly celebrates one of childhood's greatest strengths: imagination. A simple cardboard box becomes more valuable than any expensive toy because creativity fills in everything that isn't physically there. Adults often remember this episode with surprising nostalgia because it reflects how children naturally transform ordinary objects into extraordinary adventures. The writers never mock that imagination. Instead, they suggest Squidward's frustration comes from losing his ability to think the same way. It's one of SpongeBob's sweetest messages, hidden inside a hilarious story. Sometimes the most exciting adventures don't require expensive technology. They simply require someone willing to imagine something impossible. 31 reasons SpongeBob continues attracting new generations of fans is that the animation constantly evolved while preserving the spirit of the original series. Early episodes featured simpler character designs, softer colors, and slower pacing, giving Bikini Bottom a cozy handmade feeling. As animation technology improved, later seasons introduced more detailed backgrounds, smoother movement, and increasingly expressive facial animations. Yet the core personalities remained unchanged. SpongeBob stayed endlessly optimistic, Patrick remained unpredictably funny, Squidward never stopped chasing peace and quiet, and Mr. Krabs continued loving money more than almost anything else. That consistency created a rare sense of familiarity. Viewers could return after years away and immediately recognize the world they remembered. Very few animated series manage that balance between growth and tradition. SpongeBob adapted to changing animation techniques without abandoning the charm that made it special in 1999. That's perhaps the greatest secret hidden across the entire franchise. The technology improved, the audience grew older, and the jokes evolved. But Bikini Bottom always remained the same comforting place where a cheerful sponge could somehow make ordinary life feel like the greatest adventure in the ocean. 31. One of the funniest details hidden throughout SpongeBob is how seriously the characters treat money, even though they're living at the bottom of the ocean. Mr. Krabs doesn't just enjoy making a profit, he practically worships every coin that lands in his cash register. His obsession is so exaggerated that it becomes one of the show's oldest running jokes. But underneath the comedy is a surprisingly clever satire of business culture. Mr. Krabs constantly searches for ways to save money, cut expenses, and increase sales, often creating ridiculous situations that backfire spectacularly. He'll reuse supplies, invent questionable promotions, or demand impossible levels of efficiency from SpongeBob, all in the name of earning one more dollar. Yet despite his greed, he genuinely cares about the Krusty Krab when it truly matters. That balance keeps him entertaining instead of simply becoming a villain. Adults often recognize traits they've seen in real employers, while younger viewers simply laugh at a crab who loves shiny coins. It's another example of SpongeBob hiding everyday workplace humor beneath colorful animation, making the jokes work on completely different levels depending on who's watching. 32. One secret many viewers never notice is that SpongeBob almost never stays angry for very long. Throughout the series, characters argue, compete, misunderstand each other, or accidentally create complete disasters, yet SpongeBob usually forgives everyone within minutes. That wasn't accidental writing. Stephen Hillenburg wanted SpongeBob's optimism to feel genuine rather than forced. His kindness becomes one of his greatest strengths because it allows every episode to reset naturally without making characters seem cruel. Squidward insults him countless times, Patrick accidentally causes endless trouble, and Mr. Krabs frequently takes advantage of his enthusiasm. Yet SpongeBob rarely holds a grudge. Instead of seeking revenge, he simply moves on and focuses on the next adventure. In many modern comedies, characters become increasingly cynical over time. SpongeBob does the exact opposite. His cheerful outlook remains surprisingly consistent across hundreds of episodes. That's one reason the series feels comforting even after decades. Viewers know they'll encounter conflict, but they also know Bikini Bottom will return to normal before long. The show quietly reminds audiences that optimism isn't weakness. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to let bad moments define your entire day. 33. If you've ever wondered why SpongeBob's bubbles look so beautiful compared to many other cartoons, there's a good reason. The animators treated bubbles almost like additional characters instead of simple background effects. Throughout the series, bubbles become musical instruments, imaginary pets, transportation, artwork, and even entire storytelling devices. One episode famously revolves around SpongeBob teaching Bubble Buddy, a bubble shaped like a person who unexpectedly develops a life of his own. Rather than limiting bubbles to realistic behavior, the writers embraced complete imagination. Bubble sculptures float through the city, giant bubbles carry characters across Bikini Bottom, and tiny bubble effects often punctuate jokes with perfect timing. Those details create a playful atmosphere unique to SpongeBob. The bubbles remind viewers they're inside a magical underwater world where impossible things happen naturally. Even the animation team experimented with different lighting effects to make each bubble shimmer realistically against colorful backgrounds. It's an incredible amount of effort for something many viewers barely notice. Yet without those floating bubbles, Bikini Bottom would lose part of its personality. Sometimes the smallest visual details quietly shape an entire world without demanding attention. 34 Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy seem like simple superhero parodies, but they're actually affectionate tributes to classic comic book heroes and old television adventures from the 1960s and 1970s. Their costumes, dramatic speeches, exaggerated villains, and oversized gadgets intentionally resemble the style of vintage superhero shows rather than modern blockbuster movies. That's why their episodes feel different from the rest of SpongeBob. Everything becomes slightly more theatrical, complete with over-the-top narration and ridiculous action scenes. Even funnier, the heroes are now retired senior citizens who spend more time napping than fighting crime. SpongeBob and Patrick idolize them with endless enthusiasm, while Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy simply want a peaceful afternoon. That contrast creates wonderful comedy without making fun of older heroes. Instead, the series celebrates them while gently poking fun at changing times. Longtime television fans often recognize references that younger viewers completely miss. It's another example of SpongeBob rewarding multiple generations at once. Kids see funny superheroes, adults see loving tributes to classic television that helped inspire the entire genre decades earlier. 35 SpongeBob's famous jellyfishing hobby contains far more hidden details than most people realize. At first glance, it looks like a simple underwater version of catching butterflies, but the activity has its own equipment, traditions, techniques, and even competitive events. SpongeBob carries a specially designed jellyfishing net, wears protective gear, and carefully collects jelly without hurting the creatures whenever possible. Jellyfish themselves behave much like bees, buzzing through colorful fields while defending themselves if disturbed. The writers transformed ordinary outdoor hobbies into something completely original while keeping them instantly recognizable. Anyone who has ever gone fishing, hiking, or camping understands why SpongeBob loves spending entire afternoons chasing jellyfish across open fields. The activity also reveals an important part of his personality. SpongeBob doesn't need expensive entertainment to be happy. Exploring nature with his best friend is enough. Even when jellyfishing competitions become chaotic, his excitement never disappears. Those episodes quietly encourage curiosity about the natural world, reflecting Stephen Hillenburg's lifelong appreciation for marine life. Beneath all the comedy lies genuine affection for ocean ecosystems, cleverly disguised inside colorful cartoon adventures. 36. One clever storytelling trick used throughout SpongeBob is how often background characters return years after their first appearance. Instead of inventing entirely new citizens for every episode, the writers repeatedly bring back familiar fish, cashiers, police officers, bus drivers, and restaurant customers. That small decision makes Bikini Bottom feel like a real community, where people actually remember each other. Sharp-eyed viewers eventually recognize recurring faces in completely different situations. A customer complaining about food might later appear shopping downtown or relaxing at Goo Lagoon. These characters rarely receive major storylines, yet their repeated appearances quietly strengthen the illusion that life continues between episodes. Most viewers never consciously notice this pattern, but they still feel its effect. The city becomes more believable because familiar faces keep returning naturally. It's similar to living in a small town where you regularly see the same neighbors at grocery stores, restaurants, or local events. SpongeBob's world doesn't feel randomly generated for each adventure. It feels lived in. That consistency requires careful planning from artists and writers, proving that even background extras contribute to the series' remarkable sense of place. 37. One of the show's most entertaining visual traditions involves exaggerated close-up shots. Every so often, SpongeBob suddenly switches from its colorful cartoon style to an incredibly detailed, almost uncomfortable, realistic image of a character's face. Wrinkles, pores, hairs, and strange textures appear out of nowhere before the animation immediately returns to normal. These close-ups became legendary because they always arrive unexpectedly. The technique exaggerates tiny emotional moments into dramatic visual punchlines, making ordinary reactions seem absurdly intense. The artists intentionally create these images to feel slightly awkward without becoming frightening. It's a style borrowed from classic animation, where sudden visual exaggeration can make simple jokes much more memorable. Fans still quote and share these close-ups online because they remain instantly recognizable. Interestingly, the effect works precisely because it's used sparingly. If every scene looked that detailed, the joke would disappear almost immediately. Instead, the series saves these exaggerated moments for perfect comedic timing. It's another reminder that SpongeBob's humor doesn't rely only on dialogue. The animation itself constantly participates in the comedy, often delivering some of the biggest laughs without a single spoken word. 38. The Bikini Bottom news station quietly became one of the funniest recurring elements in the series because it behaves exactly like a real local television newsroom. Except every story is completely ridiculous. News anchors deliver dramatic reports about escaped jellyfish, unusual weather, restaurant competitions, or citywide disasters caused by SpongeBob and Patrick. Everything receives the same serious journalistic treatment, no matter how absurd the event actually is. That contrast creates wonderful comedy. Professional reporters remain calm while the city literally falls apart behind them. Adults especially appreciate these scenes because they parody the style of real television news broadcasts. Even the graphics, interviews, and emergency announcements resemble local stations covering breaking stories. The joke isn't aimed at journalism itself. Instead, it exaggerates how seriously media can present even the strangest situations. The news segments also help expand Bikini Bottom beyond the main cast, showing viewers that countless other citizens react to the chaos happening around them. For a few brief moments, the audience sees everyday life through someone else's perspective, making SpongeBob's adventures feel even bigger than they first appeared. 39. Patchy the Pirate might seem completely separate from SpongeBob's underwater adventures, but his live-action segments played an important role in building the franchise's identity. Introduced as SpongeBob's biggest fan, Patchy hosted special episodes while enthusiastically celebrating everything connected to Bikini Bottom. His exaggerated excitement mirrored the real passion of longtime viewers, turning him into a lovable representation of the fan community itself. Actor Tom Kenny, who also voices SpongeBob, performs as Patchy, making the connection between the fictional world and the audience even stronger. Patchy's constant arguments with his parrot Potty, his over-the-top pirate enthusiasm, and his homemade fan collections all contribute to the joke. Rather than pretending adults couldn't love cartoons, the series proudly celebrated dedicated fans of every age. Those live-action introductions also gave special episodes a festive feeling, almost like attending a celebration before the main adventure began. While younger viewers focused on the pirate comedy, longtime fans appreciated how Patchy reflected their own excitement whenever a new SpongeBob story arrived. He wasn't just a host, he represented everyone who genuinely loved visiting Bikini Bottom. 40. Perhaps the greatest hidden secret in SpongeBob is how carefully the series protects its sense of innocence. In a television landscape where many long-running shows become darker, more cynical, or increasingly complicated over time, SpongeBob continues celebrating friendship, imagination, curiosity, and simple everyday happiness. The characters certainly make mistakes, argue, and occasionally create complete chaos, but the stories almost always return to hope rather than bitterness. SpongeBob never stops believing tomorrow can be better than today. Patrick never stops enjoying the smallest adventures. Sandy never loses her curiosity. Even Squidward, despite all his complaints, occasionally reveals moments of kindness that remind viewers why he belongs in this unusual neighborhood. That emotional consistency may be the biggest reason the series has lasted for generations. Viewers don't simply return for the jokes. They return because Bikini Bottom feels like a place where optimism still matters. Behind every funny expression, impossible situation, and ridiculous adventure lies a surprisingly sincere belief that enthusiasm, loyalty, and kindness are worth protecting. That's the secret many people overlook, and it may be the most important one the series ever created. 41. One detail that slips past almost everyone is how often SpongeBob rewards viewers who pay attention to tiny continuity jokes. Unlike many cartoons that completely reset every episode, SpongeBob occasionally references earlier adventures through quick visual callbacks or returning props. A strange invention sitting in Sandy's tree dome, an old trophy inside SpongeBob's bedroom, or a familiar customer walking into the Krusty Krab can quietly remind longtime fans of stories from years earlier. These moments never interrupt the episode because the writers don't explain them. They're simply little rewards for loyal viewers. That kind of continuity makes Bikini Bottom feel like a place with real history, rather than a world that starts over every morning. Children usually don't notice these connections because they're focused on the current joke, but older fans who revisit the series often discover dozens of references they completely missed the first time. It creates a satisfying feeling that every adventure actually happened and left behind small traces. SpongeBob may look simple on the surface, but its writers consistently respected viewers who watched closely enough to notice the hidden details. 42. One of the smartest visual jokes in the entire series is Patrick's house. On the outside, it's nothing more than a large rock sitting in the middle of an empty yard. Every new viewer naturally assumes there can't possibly be much underneath it. Then Patrick casually lifts the rock, revealing an underground home complete with furniture, television, and surprisingly spacious living areas. The joke plays with expectations every single time. The outside appears unbelievably simple, while the inside somehow functions like a normal house despite making absolutely no architectural sense. That's classic SpongeBob humor. Instead of explaining how Patrick's home works, the writers trust viewers to accept the impossible. Patrick himself never questions it. To him, lifting an enormous rock every time he wants to go home is completely normal. The design also perfectly matches his personality. Patrick doesn't care about luxury, appearances, or complicated possessions. He's happy with the simplest home imaginable, as long as he can spend time with his friends. That small visual gag quietly reinforces who Patrick is without requiring a single line of dialogue. His house tells his story before he even speaks. 43. Many fans never realize how important food animation became to SpongeBob's identity. Watch any close-up of a Krabby Patty being prepared, and you'll notice an incredible amount of attention given to every ingredient. Fresh lettuce, melting cheese, perfectly grilled patties, crisp pickles, and soft buns are animated with almost unbelievable detail. The food often looks more realistic than the characters themselves. This contrast became one of the show's signature visual styles. Instead of treating meals like ordinary cartoon objects, the artists made every Krabby Patty look genuinely delicious. That choice makes SpongeBob's passion for cooking feel believable. When he proudly presents a finished burger, viewers understand why customers keep returning to the Krusty Krab. The exaggerated food animation also inspired countless internet memes and cooking recreations over the years. Fans have spent years trying to recreate Krabby Patties in real kitchens despite the recipe remaining fictional. It's amazing that an imaginary sandwich from an underwater cartoon became one of the most recognizable meals in television history. Sometimes great animation can make fictional food seem just as tempting as something sitting on a real restaurant menu. 44. SpongeBob quietly teaches one important lesson through almost every adventure. Failure isn't permanent. Nobody demonstrates that better than SpongeBob's endless attempts to earn his boating license. He has failed Mrs. Puff's driving test more times than anyone can reasonably count, yet he never gives up. Most characters would eventually quit, become bitter, or blame someone else. SpongeBob simply studies harder, practices again, and returns with the same cheerful confidence. That optimism becomes funnier because viewers already know another disaster is probably coming. Boats crash, traffic collapses, and Mrs. Puff panics before SpongeBob even touches the steering wheel. Still, The series never treats repeated failure as something shameful. Instead, it becomes part of SpongeBob's character. He refuses to let one weakness define his entire life. Ironically, he's incredibly talented in almost everything else. He's an outstanding cook, loyal friend, skilled jellyfisher, and hardworking employee. Driving simply isn't his gift. That's a surprisingly realistic message hidden beneath all the slapstick comedy. Everyone has something they're naturally good at, and something they'll probably struggle with forever. SpongeBob simply refuses to stop trying. 45. Another hidden secret appears in the way SpongeBob handles silence. Most animated comedies fill every second with non-stop dialogue or loud sound effects, but SpongeBob often allows quiet moments to become part of the joke. A character may stare awkwardly for several seconds, a dramatic pause stretches far longer than expected, or SpongeBob and Patrick silently process something completely ridiculous before reacting. Those pauses make the punchlines even stronger, because they give viewers time to anticipate what's coming next. Squidward especially benefits from this style of comedy. His exhausted expressions often become funnier than anything he actually says. The writers understand that silence can sometimes deliver a bigger laugh than another joke. This timing reflects classic visual comedy used by performers long before television existed. Rather than rushing every scene, SpongeBob carefully controls pacing, allowing awkwardness to build naturally. Many people never consciously notice these pauses, but they feel their effect. The series knows exactly when to slow down before exploding into complete chaos. That rhythm keeps the comedy unpredictable and prevents the non-stop energy from becoming exhausting over hundreds of episodes. 46. The relationship between SpongeBob and Gary contains one of the sweetest hidden details in the series. Although Gary communicates mostly by meowing, SpongeBob almost always understands exactly what he's trying to say. Their conversations play out like those between a devoted pet owner and a beloved cat, except both participants seem convinced they're speaking perfectly clearly. Gary occasionally rolls his eyes, offers sarcastic reactions, or quietly points SpongeBob toward the obvious solution without saying a recognizable word. Adults often notice that Gary behaves less like a typical cartoon animal and more like the calm, responsible member of the household. SpongeBob may be endlessly enthusiastic, but Gary frequently becomes the quiet voice of reason. Their friendship also avoids exaggerated sentimentality. Instead of constantly reminding viewers how much they love each other, the series simply shows it through everyday routines like feeding Gary, cleaning his bowl, or spending quiet evenings together. Those ordinary moments feel genuine because they reflect real relationships between people and their pets. Even in a city filled with impossible creatures, SpongeBob and Gary's bond remains surprisingly relatable and emotionally authentic. 47. One reason SpongeBob remains endlessly rewatchable is that every major character represents a completely different way of approaching life. SpongeBob embraces optimism, Patrick enjoys simplicity, Sandy values curiosity, Squidward seeks peace, Mr. Krabs chases success, and Plankton refuses to stop dreaming despite constant failure. None of these perspectives is presented as completely right or completely wrong. Instead, the writers allow them to clash naturally, creating comedy through personality rather than forced conflict. That's why almost any combination of characters can carry an episode. SpongeBob and Patrick create childlike chaos, SpongeBob and Squidward become workplace comedy, Mr. Krabs and Plankton generate business rivalry, while Sandy introduces science and adventure. The personalities fit together like puzzle pieces, allowing hundreds of stories without making anyone feel repetitive. Many cartoons depend on constantly introducing new characters to stay fresh. SpongeBob rarely needs to do that because its core cast already contains enough variety to generate endless situations. That careful character design is one of the biggest secrets behind the show's extraordinary longevity and lasting popularity. 48. Long before internet memes dominated popular culture, SpongeBob accidentally became one of the greatest meme factories in entertainment history. Countless reaction images, quotes, and facial expressions from the series have spread across social media for years. Mocking SpongeBob, Handsome Squidward, Caveman SpongeBob, and dozens of other screenshots became part of everyday online conversations, often used by people who haven't watched the show in years. The reason these moments work so well is simple. The animators created incredibly expressive faces that communicate emotions instantly without requiring context. Confusion, excitement, panic, Pride, embarrassment, and frustration can all be understood from a single frame. That's remarkably difficult to achieve in animation. The internet simply recognized something the artists had been doing all along. SpongeBob wasn't designed to become meme material, yet its expressive visuals made that outcome almost inevitable. Very few television shows continue influencing popular culture decades after their premiere. SpongeBob manages it almost effortlessly because its humor translates perfectly into single, unforgettable images that people instantly recognize around the world. 49. One fascinating secret is that Stephen Hillenburg always wanted the series to celebrate creativity rather than realism. Whenever fans asked complicated scientific questions about Bikini Bottom, the answers almost always pointed back to imagination instead of strict logic. Why does fire exist underwater? How can characters cry underwater? Why do they need boats beneath the sea? The official answer was never complicated science. It was simply that these ideas made better stories. Hillenburg understood something many creators forget. Audiences willingly accept impossible rules as long as those rules remain entertaining and emotionally consistent. Trying to explain every tiny detail with complicated fictional science would only distract from the comedy. Instead, Bikini Bottom operates according to its own playful logic, where storytelling always comes first. That philosophy gave the writers enormous creative freedom while keeping the series approachable for every generation. It's a valuable reminder that imagination doesn't need endless explanations to feel meaningful. Sometimes the funniest answer really is the simplest one. In SpongeBob's world, impossible things happen because they make people smile, and that has always been enough. 50. Perhaps the most overlooked SpongeBob secret of all is that the series quietly reflects Stephen Hillenburg's lifelong love for the ocean without ever feeling like a classroom lecture. Before becoming an animator, Hillenburg studied marine biology and taught the subject to students, and that background shaped everything from the colorful sea creatures to the vibrant underwater environments. Even though Bikini Bottom is wildly exaggerated, it still encourages curiosity about life beneath the ocean's surface. Countless viewers first learned the names of sea stars, sponges, crabs, octopuses, plankton, snails, and jellyfish because of this cartoon. The series never pauses to deliver educational speeches. Instead, it sparks curiosity naturally through entertaining characters and imaginative adventures. That's one of Stephen Hillenburg's greatest achievements. He transformed genuine enthusiasm for marine life into one of the most beloved animated worlds ever created. Decades later, millions of people still return to Bikini Bottom, not because it follows scientific rules, but because it captures something even more important: the joy of exploring a world where friendship, imagination, and endless curiosity make every ordinary day feel like a brand new adventure beneath the sea. 51. One of the easiest Easter eggs to overlook is how often SpongeBob quietly celebrates classic animation without announcing it. The series regularly experiments with different art styles, exaggerated expressions, painted backgrounds, and visual techniques that pay tribute to the golden age of cartoons. Some episodes suddenly shift into watercolor paintings, stop-motion-inspired sequences, puppet-style performances, or vintage comic book layouts for just a few seconds before returning to the normal look. These moments aren't random. The animation team enjoys surprising viewers while honoring the history of the medium that inspired them. Kids usually see these scenes as funny visual changes, while animation fans recognize them as loving references to decades of cartoon innovation. The best part is that none of these artistic experiments interrupt the story. Instead, they make Bikini Bottom feel like a place where imagination has no limits. Every now and then, the artists remind viewers that animation can become absolutely anything if it serves the joke. That creative freedom is one of the biggest reasons SpongeBob never feels visually repetitive, even after hundreds of episodes. 52. SpongeBob's bedroom hides more personality than almost any other room in Bikini Bottom. At first glance, it looks like a cheerful place filled with bright colors and ordinary furniture, but nearly every object reflects his optimistic character. His alarm clock is always ready for another exciting morning. Shelves are filled with books, trophies, and keepsakes collected from previous adventures. His neatly organized closet shows someone who genuinely enjoys routine, while his polished shoes wait beside the bed because he's excited to go to work every single day. Nothing in the room feels expensive or luxurious. yet everything feels cared for. That's the important detail. SpongeBob appreciates what he has instead of constantly wishing for something bigger. Compare that with Mr. Krabs obsessing over wealth or Plankton chasing impossible dreams, and SpongeBob's happiness feels almost refreshing. His bedroom quietly reinforces one of the show's strongest themes. Joy doesn't necessarily come from owning more things. Sometimes it comes from appreciating the simple life you've already built. That's a surprisingly meaningful message hidden inside a cheerful pineapple beneath the sea. 53 SpongeBob's alarm clock deserves far more credit than it usually gets. Every morning begins with the same incredible enthusiasm as SpongeBob leaps out of bed, gets dressed in seconds, and races toward another workday with the excitement of someone leaving for the best vacation ever. Most sitcom characters hate mornings. SpongeBob practically celebrates them. That running joke becomes even funnier because so many viewers experience the exact opposite feeling every weekday. Adults drag themselves toward work while SpongeBob sings happily on his way to flip burgers. His morning routine never feels repetitive because the writers constantly find new ways to exaggerate his excitement. Sometimes he dances out the front door. Sometimes he kisses Gary goodbye like an explorer beginning an epic expedition. Sometimes he practically launches himself into the street before sunrise. His optimism turns the most ordinary daily routine into an adventure. It also quietly establishes the tone of nearly every episode. Before any chaos begins, viewers are reminded that SpongeBob truly believes today might become the greatest day of his life. That's a wonderful way to start almost any story. 54. One clever secret hidden throughout the series is how often SpongeBob uses real emotions instead of forcing constant jokes. While the show is famous for its comedy, many episodes quietly pause to let characters feel disappointed, nervous, lonely, or proud without immediately interrupting those moments with another punchline. SpongeBob sometimes worries about letting Mr. Krabs down. Patrick occasionally feels left out. Squidward experiences genuine frustration when his dreams don't work out. Even Plankton sometimes reveals loneliness beneath his endless schemes. Those emotional scenes never become overly dramatic because the writers know exactly when to return to humor. That balance makes the characters feel surprisingly authentic. Viewers laugh at their mistakes because they also understand their feelings. Many cartoons rely entirely on non-stop comedy, but SpongeBob allows quieter emotional moments to breathe before moving forward. That's one reason people continue caring about these characters after so many years. They aren't just joke machines. They react like real friends who occasionally struggle, recover, and keep going. The comedy becomes stronger because it grows from personalities that actually feel believable beneath all the underwater absurdity. 55 few viewers notice how carefully SpongeBob's color palette changes depending on the mood of an episode. Bright sunny adventures usually feature vivid blues, warm yellows, tropical greens, and colorful coral reefs filling every scene. During mysterious stories involving the Flying Dutchman or spooky caves, the backgrounds shift toward darker blues, greens, and eerie lighting without becoming frightening for younger viewers. Even inside the Krusty Krab, warm wooden colors create a cozy atmosphere that contrasts with the colder metallic interior of the Chum Bucket. These choices happen so naturally that most people never consciously notice them. Yet color quietly guides emotions throughout every episode. Production artists use lighting and background design almost like another storyteller, helping viewers understand whether a scene should feel exciting, peaceful, mysterious, or dramatic before anyone even speaks. That's sophisticated visual storytelling hidden inside a children's cartoon. The creators understood that mood isn't created only through dialogue or music. Sometimes the color of the ocean itself can make an ordinary conversation feel completely different. Those artistic decisions helped give Bikini Bottom its unmistakable visual identity. 56. One of the funniest hidden patterns in SpongeBob is that almost every major villain defeats themselves long before the heroes actually stop them. Plankton spends enormous amounts of time designing complicated machines, elaborate disguises, and impossible inventions, but his own overconfidence usually ruins everything. Instead of stealing the Krabby Patty formula quietly, he creates giant robots, dramatic speeches, or unnecessarily complex plans that collapse under their own weight. Even other antagonists throughout the series often make the same mistake. Their biggest obstacle isn't SpongeBob, it's their inability to stop making bad decisions. SpongeBob himself rarely wins through strength or clever tricks. More often, his honesty, persistence, or simple kindness accidentally exposes flaws in the villain's plan. That's an interesting storytelling choice because it rewards positive behavior without turning SpongeBob into an unbeatable superhero. He succeeds by remaining true to himself, while everyone else creates unnecessary complications. It's another example of the series quietly suggesting that life becomes much harder when people overthink simple problems. SpongeBob rarely tries to outsmart anyone. He simply refuses to stop being himself. 57. The relationship between SpongeBob and Squidward becomes much funnier once you realize they actually improve each other's lives, even if neither of them would openly admit it. SpongeBob constantly pulls Squidward into adventures he never wanted, forcing him to leave his comfort zone and occasionally discover moments of unexpected happiness. At the same time, Squidward's calm personality prevents SpongeBob from becoming completely uncontrollable. Their opposite personalities create balance rather than simple conflict. Viewers often focus on Squidward's complaints, but there are many episodes where he quietly protects SpongeBob, helps him solve problems, or secretly feels proud of him. Those small moments matter because they reveal genuine friendship beneath all the arguments. Real friendships aren't built on agreeing about everything. They're built on staying connected despite countless differences. SpongeBob never stops believing Squidward is his friend, while Squidward gradually accepts that SpongeBob genuinely cares about him. It's one of the series' most satisfying long-term relationships because it grows naturally over hundreds of episodes instead of changing overnight. Their friendship feels earned rather than forced. 58. Another hidden detail appears whenever Bikini Bottom celebrates holidays. Instead of copying human traditions exactly, the writers reinvent them with underwater twists that fit the world perfectly. Decorations, festivals, sports, and community events often resemble familiar celebrations while adding marine-inspired humor. Even Christmas received its own unforgettable episode, where SpongeBob excitedly introduces the holiday to Bikini Bottom after learning about Santa Claus. The humor works because the residents react exactly as people might when encountering an entirely new tradition for the first time. Some believe immediately, others remain skeptical, and everyone eventually becomes caught up in the excitement. Rather than simply parodying holidays, the series celebrates why communities enjoy them in the first place. Friends gather together, neighbors help each other, and optimism spreads throughout the city. These episodes feel timeless because they focus less on specific customs and more on shared experiences. Whether it's a parade, a festival, or a neighborhood celebration, Bikini Bottom always finds a way to transform ordinary events into unforgettable adventures while preserving the warm spirit that defines the series. 59. SpongeBob's incredible popularity around the world isn't just the result of funny stories. One hidden reason is that the show's central themes work almost everywhere. Nearly everyone understands difficult coworkers, loyal friendships, demanding bosses, embarrassing mistakes, impossible driving tests, or the joy of spending time with people who make life better. Those experiences don't depend on language or culture. They feel universal. That's why SpongeBob has been successfully translated into dozens of languages while keeping its charm. The jokes certainly change slightly between countries, but the personalities remain recognizable everywhere. SpongeBob's optimism, Patrick's innocence, Squidward's frustration, and Mr. Krabs' obsession with money all communicate instantly regardless of where viewers live. Great storytelling often begins with specific characters but explores emotions everyone understands. Bikini Bottom may be fictional, yet the relationships inside it feel surprisingly familiar. That's one reason new generations continue discovering the show. The ocean setting may be unusual, but the emotional experiences belong to everyone. Great friendships, difficult days, and hopeful mornings exist in every part of the world. 60. Perhaps the most remarkable SpongeBob secret is that the series never forgot its original purpose. Even after becoming one of the biggest animated franchises in television history, it continued encouraging viewers to stay curious, laugh often, work hard, value friendship, and find excitement in ordinary moments. SpongeBob never becomes cynical simply because success would make that easier. He still believes making the perfect Krabby Patty matters. He still races outside to catch jellyfish. He still laughs with Patrick over the simplest jokes. Those qualities may sound childish at first, but many adults eventually realize they're surprisingly difficult to preserve in real life. The older audiences become, the more they understand why SpongeBob's optimism feels refreshing instead of unrealistic. It's not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about refusing to let those problems erase your enthusiasm. Stephen Hillenburg created far more than a funny cartoon sponge, and he created a character who quietly reminds millions of viewers that kindness, imagination, curiosity, and genuine joy never really go out of style. That may be the greatest secret hidden anywhere in Bikini Bottom. 61. One of the most fascinating secrets hiding inside SpongeBob is how the show quietly respects its audience's intelligence. The writers rarely stop to explain every joke, visual reference, or strange background detail. Instead, they trust viewers to discover things naturally over time. That's why so many people rewatch episodes years later and suddenly notice something they completely missed as children. A funny sign in the background, a clever line of dialogue, or a subtle callback to an earlier episode suddenly makes perfect sense. The series never shouts, "Look at this Easter egg." It simply hides it in plain sight and moves on. That confidence is surprisingly rare in children's television, but many shows repeat every important joke several times to make sure nobody misses it. SpongeBob does the opposite. It rewards curiosity instead of demanding attention. That's probably why the series has remained entertaining across multiple generations. Every visit to Bikini Bottom feels slightly different because your own perspective changes. The show stays the same, but your understanding quietly grows with every rewatch, making even familiar episodes feel fresh all over again. 62. Another hidden detail many fans overlook is how incredibly expressive SpongeBob's eyes are. Animation fans often focus on his laugh or his square shape, but his giant blue eyes do much of the storytelling. Tiny movements completely change his personality from one second to the next. When SpongeBob feels excited, his eyes practically sparkle. When he's confused, they widen dramatically before his mouth even reacts. During emotional moments, the animators often let his eyes carry the entire scene with very little dialogue. This technique makes him feel unusually alive compared to many cartoon characters. It's easy to forget that SpongeBob is little more than a yellow rectangle with simple facial features. Yet thanks to careful animation, he communicates an enormous range of emotions without needing complicated designs. The same principle applies to Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs. Their expressions constantly exaggerate thoughts before words arrive. That visual storytelling helps younger viewers understand emotions while making older audiences appreciate just how skilled the animation team really is. Sometimes a single facial expression becomes funnier than an entire page of dialogue. 63. One secret that quietly shaped the entire series is Stephen Hillenburg's decision to avoid turning SpongeBob into an ordinary hero. Most cartoon protagonists eventually become stronger, smarter, or more important as their stories continue. SpongeBob never really changes in that way. He doesn't gain magical powers, become mayor of Bikini Bottom, or suddenly master every challenge. He remains an enthusiastic fry cook who still struggles with driving lessons and still believes every day is full of possibilities. That consistency keeps the character relatable. Success never changes who he is. Even after saving Bikini Bottom countless times, SpongeBob happily returns to the Krusty Krab to flip burgers with the same excitement he showed in the very first episode. It's an unusual storytelling choice because many long-running series constantly chase bigger adventures. SpongeBob proves that ordinary life can remain entertaining if the characters are interesting enough. Instead of becoming larger than life, SpongeBob reminds viewers that kindness, curiosity, and enthusiasm are already extraordinary qualities when practiced every single day. 64. If you've watched enough SpongeBob episodes, you've probably noticed that almost every character has at least one unforgettable catchphrase. SpongeBob cheerfully shouts, "I'm ready!" Patrick delivers wonderfully confused observations with complete confidence. Mr. Krabs talks endlessly about money, while Plankton dramatically announces another brilliant plan that almost certainly won't work. These catchphrases aren't repeated simply because they're recognizable. They reinforce each character's personality in just a few words. The writers use them carefully rather than forcing them into every conversation. That's why they stay funny instead of becoming annoying. Over the years, many of these lines escaped the television screen and entered everyday conversation. Fans quote them without even thinking about where they originally came from. Very few animated series have produced so many instantly recognizable expressions. The reason is simple. Every catchphrase feels like something that specific character would naturally say. They don't exist to sell merchandise or create internet memes. They exist because they perfectly capture personalities audiences already know and love. Great dialogue often becomes memorable because it feels inevitable rather than manufactured. 65. One of SpongeBob's greatest hidden strengths is how it treats imagination as a genuine skill rather than childish behavior. Whenever SpongeBob and Patrick invent games, pretend ordinary objects are something extraordinary, or create entire adventures out of nothing, the show never mocks them for acting immature. Instead, their creativity becomes a source of happiness that repeatedly solves problems and strengthens friendships. Adults watching the series often recognize something they've gradually lost over the years. Children naturally transform cardboard boxes into spaceships and empty fields into magical kingdoms. SpongeBob celebrates that ability instead of encouraging viewers to outgrow it. Even Sandy, the brilliant scientist, appreciates imagination because she understands that creativity and curiosity often work together. Many inventions begin with someone imagining something impossible before finding a way to build it. That subtle message appears again and again throughout the series. Bikini Bottom constantly reminds viewers that creativity isn't something reserved for children. It's a way of looking at the world with excitement instead of routine. Perhaps that's why the show still feels so refreshing after all these years. 66. Before we reach the final secret, here's one more detail that deserves attention. SpongeBob has inspired countless artists, animators, marine biology students, comedians, and storytellers around the world. Many professional animators working today openly describe the series as one of the reasons they fell in love with animation in the first place. Others discovered an interest in ocean life because Stephen Hillenburg made marine creatures feel fascinating instead of intimidating. Even comedians often praise SpongeBob's perfect timing, expressive animation, and willingness to commit completely to absurd ideas. That's an extraordinary legacy for a cartoon about a sponge who cooks burgers. The series didn't simply entertain millions of viewers, it encouraged creativity across entirely different fields. Some fans learned to draw by copying SpongeBob characters. Others studied animation after falling in love with the show's visual style. Few television series can honestly claim they inspired future generations of artists and scientists at the same time. SpongeBob quietly accomplished both without ever pretending to be anything more than a funny story beneath the sea. 67. The biggest SpongeBob secret isn't hidden in a background sign, a freeze frame, or an obscure episode. It's hidden in the reason people keep coming back. Every generation discovers Bikini Bottom at a different stage of life, yet everyone somehow finds a character they understand. As children, many of us wanted to be SpongeBob because his endless excitement made life look magical. As teenagers, Patrick's carefree attitude suddenly seemed hilarious. As adults, Squidward starts making an uncomfortable amount of sense, and Mr. Krabs becomes a reminder that chasing money alone rarely leads to happiness. Somehow, the same episodes continue changing because we change. That's the genius of Stephen Hillenburg's creation. He built a world that grows alongside its audience without ever losing its playful heart. The jokes remain funny, the friendships remain sincere, and the optimism never feels outdated. Few television shows achieve that kind of timelessness. Bikini Bottom isn't simply a cartoon setting anymore. It's a place millions of people revisit whenever they need a reminder that curiosity, laughter, loyal friends, and a little imagination can still make even the most ordinary day feel extraordinary. Thanks for diving into Bikini Bottom with me. Now tell me, which secret surprised you the most? And which one have you secretly noticed for years? If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden details, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows, and let me know what cartoon should be next. There's always another hidden secret waiting just beneath the surface.